Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 64. It's Mr. Mime time. The episode begins with Ash and the gang on their way back to Pallet Town when they come across a phone booth on the road and decide to stop and leave Ash's mom a message informing him that they were coming home, because Ash had successfully gotten all the badges he needed and was ready for the Pokemon League. After Ash hangs up, Ash and the gang then run at Mach 80 speed back to Pallet Town, but are unfortunately stopped in their tracks when they encounter what seems to be an invisible barrier as Brock tests it out, knocking on it. It's only further confirmed to be an invisible wall, as a Pokemon then climbs on it, and obviously the wall had to exist if it could be climbed on, and Ash decides to use his Pokedex on the Pokemon, which tells him that it's Mr. Mime, a Pokemon that can create invisible barriers, and is a mime. Wow, no shit, it's Mr. Mime. Ash decides that he wants to capture the Mr. Mime, and tries to, but then a girl shows up and claims that she wants to catch him instead. Ash immediately argues that he wanted to catch it, but Brock then stops him, as Brock being Brock, starts to have a crush on this girl, and starts to simp for her. So Brock's like, yo Ash, let her catch it. And Ash and the girl proceed to argue, which the Mr. Mime takes as an opportunity to walk away. The girl attempts to catch him as he walks away, but the Mr. Mime had set up yet another invisible barrier, which blocked the Pokeball from reaching him and sent it blasting back at the girl. The girl is very, very upset at losing the Mr. Mime, like more so than if she just randomly lost a Pokemon that she was looking for. So Brock realizes that there must be something more to her sadness, and being the simp that he is, immediately goes to comfort her and ensures her that he was going to help her with whatever she was sad about. This leads the girl to take Ash and the gang to the local Pokemon circus and reveal that she was a ringmaster there, and uses her Pokemon in all of her shows, with her Mr. Mime being the main one that she uses. Suddenly, though, a whole bunch of circus workers come out and ask her if she has located a new Mr. Mime yet, and the girl sadly denies. Ash and the gang are obviously confused by this. If the Mr. Mime was the star of her circus show, then why did she need another one? She already had a Mr. Mime, right? Well, this leads the girl, whose name was Stella, to take Ash and the gang to her trailer, where her Mr. Mime is there, but it's resting and doing absolutely nothing but eating food, rendering it useless in the show to the point where she needed to go grab another one. She also reveals the reasoning for why this Mr. Mime was refusing to perform, which was that it thought that her training methods were too extreme. Brock then offers to help the girl get another Mr. Mime to use, and the girl thanks him, but clarifies that although she did need another Mr. Mime, she wasn't planning on actually using him in the show. She was planning on using him to make the other Mr. Mime, the original one, jealous, and therefore make him want to come back to her. So basically, she knew that her and her Pokemon's bond was too strong to replace it, thankfully. But was their bond really that strong if the Mr. Mime thought that her training methods were like abuse to the point where it decided to quit? I don't know. Misty compliments the plan, stating how making the Mr. Mime jealous would probably work, as it always worked with Ash, as he was always jealous when Gary came around. This leads Ash to get pissed off, as Brock still continues to accept the girl's request, showing off his muscles as proof that he could catch the Mr. Mime, being strong enough. Ash knows, though, that Brock likely wouldn't be able to catch a Mr. Mime if he couldn't do it, and questions what Brock was actually planning to do, with Brock vaguely stating that they would make a Mr. Mime. Ash got freaked out at this, assuming it meant that they were going to do some freaky-ass science experiments and create a Mr. Mime. He is only further freaked out when Brock tells him that his assistance was absolutely vital. Meanwhile, at the Team Rocket hideout, Giovanni had demanded a call with Jesse and James, in which he proceeds to absolutely fucking scream at them for destroying his gym and always wasting his time. Team Rocket proceed to apologize and claim that they were going to get Giovanni the best fucking Pokemon ever to make up for their failures, hoping that that would satisfy him. They then run off to go do so, not wanting to listen to Giovanni's complaints anymore. Giovanni then hangs up and turns to the armored mysterious Pokemon, stating that Jesse and James would never fucking be able to find a Pokemon that was more rare than him. Team Rocket had retreated into their balloon and were brainstorming what Pokemon that they should get Giovanni, when suddenly the wind blew a poster for the Pokemon Circus into their faces, leading Jesse to see the Mr. Mime and decide that Mr. Mime was rare enough to capture. They then get the idea, though, to simply go to the circus and capture all of the Pokemon there. Meanwhile, back at the circus, the girl, along with Misty, were actually extremely happy with what Brock had accomplished. Brock had actually done something to impress a girl. Let's go! As for what Brock actually did, it's revealed that he thankfully wasn't going to do any science experiments to try and create a Mr. Mime. No, the reason why he needed Ash was because he had instructed Ash to dress up as a fake Mr. Mime and have Ash perform in the circus in place of the regular Mr. Mime, as opposed to having to go out and actually catch another one. It would still have the same effect, hopefully making the Mr. Mime jealous. Ash questions with annoyance why he has to be the one to wear the fucking stupid costume, with Brock rebutting that he was too tall, and Misty rebutting that her face was too beautiful, so she didn't want to cover it with a Mr. Mime mask. Ash tries to deny their weak-ass excuses, but Brock doesn't budge at all, and simply tells Ash that Stella would be a great ringmaster. Ash still protests, obviously not wanting to have to get fucking whipped, but after some begging from the circus workers and Stella, Ash eventually agrees, as he develops a crush on some of the circus workers. Damn, Ash, come on, you're just being like Brock here. Ash then remembers the reason why he was so against the training in the first place, as Stella then pulls out her whip and demands that Mr. Mime start miming around. Ash obviously doesn't know how the fuck to do this, but tries his best anyway to mimic Mr. Mime's movements, but it's not good enough, causing Stella to whip him and whip him and whip him over again. Damn, we're just training. I don't think you needed to do that to Ash, bro. But with this, Ash realizes that maybe her Mr. Mime had a point after all. This was abuse. Ash continues the training, however, not wanting to give up his chance with all of the girls, most likely. And as for Misty and Brock, they return to Stella's trailer, where they try to tell the Mr. Mime that it had competition to make it jealous, but the Mr. Mime doesn't react at all, simply continuing to eat. Later, it's finally time for the circus to begin, as the announcer arrives on stage, and Brock and Misty sit in the crowd, examining all of Ash and Stella's competition, being a Ponyta Rapidash, a Machoke, a Tangela, Execute, Dodrio. They then spot Ash and Stella, though, Ash dressed in the Mr. Mime costume. Stella instructs Ash to wave to the crowd to win their favor, so Ash does this, but when he looks into the crowd, he immediately spots his mom watching, and this gets him excited, as he hasn't saw his mom in a fucking long time, so he tries to call out to her, but this leads Stella to remind Ash to shut the fuck up, because he was supposed to be a Pokemon right now. You can't be talking. The lights then go out as the show is supposed to begin, but it turns out that the first act is actually Jesse and James breaking in. No, just kidding, it obviously wasn't an official part of the show, but hey, Jesse and James wanted to make a good entrance for their motto, which they proceed to perform. Honestly, it may have been more entertaining than some of the fucking Pokemon acts. After performing their motto, they then proceed to use gliders as they fly down, implying that it was part of the act, but they instead fly down to Ash, believing that he was a Mr. Mime that they wanted to capture, and swoop him up inside a net. They then glide back up to the platform they were on, and proceed to use a rope that was attached to their balloon to bring themselves back up, and also reel in Ash, still believing he was a Mr. Mime. With the show now cancelled due to the kidnapping, Brock and Misty run up to Stella to comfort her after what happened, and then Ash's mom actually runs up to all three of them and worriedly asks if Ash was the one in the costume, which she assumed was true, because Ash wasn't with Brock and Misty like usual, so he must have ended up somewhere. Brock and Misty confirm Ash's mom's assumption, but Ash's mom actually calms down very quickly, reasoning that once Team Rocket realized that Ash was Ash and not a Mr. Mime, they would just let him go, and everything would be fine and dandy. Brock and Misty agree for some reason, even though they should know that they would probably try and kidnap Ash anyways. And Ash's mom then invites Brock and Misty to her house for a meal, wanting to calm herself down while Ash was missing. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had retreated with Ash back to that cabin from episode 50, and were happily exclaiming how they finally caught a Mr. Mime. And now they could give him to Giovanni and not get their asses beat. Yay! They decide to eat lunch to celebrate, which distracts them enough to the point where Ash is able to untie himself from Team Rocket's ropes that they had captured him in, and then he proceeds to take off his mask, which obviously freaks Team Rocket the fuck out, as they genuinely believe that Ash was a Mr. Mime. Ash explains that he isn't, and Team Rocket get pissed off, as, for one, they now didn't have a catch for the boss, and two, Ash proceeds to run the fuck away, bolting out the door. This causes Team Rocket to chase after him in anger, but by the time they get outside, Ash has already taken off, stealing their Meowth balloon in the process. This in turn just leaves them more angry. Great, they're probably gonna come back now. Meanwhile, Brock, Misty, and Stella had finished a meal at Ash's mom's house, and they thanked her and walked off as Ash's mom said goodbye. Now having nothing to distract her from her mind, she began to get a little worried, despite earlier claiming how confident she was that Ash would come back, and she just sits on the couch, pondering what she would do if Ash never came back. As if on cue, though, a Mr. Mime then shows up at her window, and she believes that this is Ash, although this Mr. Mime was actually the one from before, the wild one. Believing this Pokemon to be her son, though, she then lets the Mr. Mime inside and treats it to a good-ass fucking meal, which it gobbles up super fast. Soon after, though, Ash arrives inside Team Rocket's balloon, and eventually goes back inside the house, which obviously confuses his mom, as she spots two Mr. Mimes, leading Ash to take off his costume and reveal himself. This leads Ash's mom to realize that the other Mr. Mime was in fact a wild one, and states that she should have known, as Ash never would have ate the food that she made as quickly as the wild Mr. Mime did. Ash, not wanting to have to dress up in the Mr. Mime costume anymore, then requests the wild Mr. Mime to help out Stella with making her Mr. Mime jealous, but the Mr. Mime declines, as it's frightened by Ash. I mean, it just saw what it thought was one of its kind turn into a fucking human, so due to it being uncomfortable, it only decides to help Ash after some incentivizing from Ash's mom, being that if it helped, then she would make it a huge-ass dessert. Meanwhile, back at the circus, Team Rocket had returned for revenge, and they were not alone this time, as they had a tank that could fire fucking missiles and nets. They didn't just want a Mr. Mime, they wanted all the Pokemon there, so they proceed to fire missiles to attack the Pokemon, and then fire nets as well to capture them all. They managed to unfortunately capture all the Pokemon very easily, as there was no one there to stop them, but then the circus workers thankfully notice that all the Pokemon were captured, and they proceed to grab them still inside their nets while Team Rocket was still inside the tank, and they place all the nets inside of some trailers, and they attempt to drive off with all the Pokemon, driving them to safety. Team Rocket spots this and gets very furious, as they then fire a huge-ass net over the trucks, trapping the trucks and preventing them from driving any further. James then notes how even though they had successfully captured all the other Pokemon, they still didn't have a Mr. Mime, so he uses the tank's little finder bot thing on the top to try and locate a Mr. Mime, and it eventually locks on to Stella's Mr. Mime, who had run out of the trailer after it was one of the ones likely used to drive the Pokemon to safety. Due to not being used to running, though, due to only eating and sleeping for the past however long, it quickly collapses as soon as it begins running. But thankfully, Stella shows up and manages to save it and hurl it onto its back as she runs away from the tank, holding Mr. Mime. Aw, she saved it. Maybe this will make the Mr. Mime now respect her training and be willing to go more through with the abuse, just because she saved him. Well, that's if they even survive, as they weren't running fucking fast enough, and Team Rocket's tank was swiftly catching up to them to the point where it was able to lock on one of its missiles. The missile, along with a net, is about to fire at them, but then suddenly, Ash shows up at the last second and blocks the missile from firing, getting in the way. Ash's mom, Brock, Misty, and the wild Mr. Mime then show up behind him, as James angrily begs Ash to move, stating that they needed to capture the Mr. Mime. But hey, I guess they must like Ash a little bit, because they could technically just fire a missile at him, right? And then boom, he'd be dead. But they don't. Because of this, Pikachu is able to get off a Thunderbolt on the tank, assuming that would take out Team Rocket, but oh no it doesn't, which absolutely shocks Ash. Team Rocket actually survived lightning for once? Oh my god. Meowth reveals that it's because they specifically designed the tank to be made out of rubber. Whoa, no way. Team Rocket then do decide to kill Ash after all, as they proceed to drive right into him. I don't know why they just didn't go with the missile, like I said, but Ash thankfully saves himself by sending out Charizard, who blocks the tank, but Ash wanted him to use fucking flamethrower to melt the tank, but he refuses to do so, simply lying on the ground. Stating how useless Charizard was, Ash returns it to its Pokeball and proceeds to run away and try and dodge the tank as it was coming at him. But he was obviously going to fail. He can't outrun a tank. Ash's mom knows this, so she begs for the wild Mr. Mime to go through with its promise of helping Ash, even though this was way different than performing in the circus, and reminds him of the dessert that he would get if he did so. This leads the Mr. Mime to then jump in front of the tank, which excites Team Rocket, as now a Mr. Mime was fucking right there that they could just capture, but the Mr. Mime then uses its barrier attack to create an invisible wall, just as it had done before, and Team Rocket ends up driving straight into it, as it prevents them from moving any further. Team Rocket tries several things to break the barrier, such as revving their engines, hoping that it would apply enough force, but it didn't, and then they try firing a missile at it, but the barrier ends up just deflecting the missile due to its psychic qualities, which causes Stella, Brock, and Misty to state with amazement how cool Mr. Mime's barrier was. Stella's compliments, in turn, make her Mr. Mime jealous. That's all it took, huh? A life and death situation? Just then, Team Rocket realized that their efforts to capture the wild Mr. Mime were futile, and immediately turn around and revert their focus back to Stella's Mr. Mime, heading towards him. This causes Brock, Misty, and Stella to panic, but Stella's Mr. Mime then just sees it as an opportunity to prove itself as better than the other Mr. Mime that it was jealous of, and proceeds to use a barrier attack of its own, creating yet another barrier that Team Rocket runs into, so meaning that they had barriers now blocking them on both sides. The wild Mr. Mime then notices this, and proceeds to build even more barriers of its own, which causes Stella's Mr. Mime to notice that, and build even more barriers, and it continues in an endless cycle of both of them wanting to prove that they were the better Mr. Mime, more efficient at creating barriers, that they create so many barriers that it traps Team Rocket in a huge tower-like structure, made entirely of barriers. With Team Rocket now trapped, the day was now saved, as the wild Mr. Mime runs to Ash's mom, desperate for that reward dessert that it was promised. Ash's mom hugs it, and decides to nickname it Mimey, and take it on as a house pet. Yo, no way, Ash's mom's first Pokemon. Anyways, as for Stella and her Mr. Mime, Stella was absolutely amazed at her Mr. Mime's abilities. It was because of this that she realized that her Mr. Mime was already good enough on its own, and didn't necessarily need all of that strict training that she was giving it, and she apologizes to it for all the abuse, and promises to stop, hugging it and crying tears of joy when her Mr. Mime accepts her apology. Meanwhile, inside the tower-like structure, Team Rocket was trying to free themselves by breaking all the barriers with missiles, but the missiles all deflect off of the barriers, deflecting onto the tank itself, destroying it, and sending Team Rocket blasting off. Hey, at least they were technically free. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had returned to Ash's house, and after the Mr. Mime got the dessert reward, it realized that it liked not just eating food, but cooking food as well, and agreed to essentially become the maid around Ash's house, and proceeded to cook Ash and the gang dinner. The episode ends with Misty joking how Mr. Mime was more of a goddamn help around the house than Ash. Like, bro, your mom's a single mother at this point, and you just leave to become a Pokemon master, leaving your mom with no help. But hey, this Pokemon's at least willing to help when you're not. This leads Ash to get embarrassed as fuck.